if I'm Balmer, I don't give a what that calorie said. I don't care what it says. I am cheating. I got too much money to be on the same playing field with you.
Kawhi Leonard is a player who's somewhat dodged the mainstream media for much of his career. From his early days in San Antonio to his later years in LA, it seems like the only thing that truly upset his fans were the amount of games he'd sit out due to injury or load management. But you can't fault a guy for being overly cautious and preserving his body, right? However, something came up recently. It all stemmed from the Spurs' first encounter with his uncle, Dennis Robertson, in the 2017-18 season when Kawhi sat out the entire year due to what Uncle Dennis described as a quadriceps rehabilitation program. And that's fine, he needs time to recover. But what wasn't fine was how secretive they were being with Kawhi's injury, cause he was clear to play but still wasn't playing. Now, with recent reports coming out that claim Kawhi Leonard is allegedly being paid under the table by Clippers owner Steve Ballmer, not only could this become the NBA's biggest controversy in a long time, but it's also revealing the sketchy negotiating tactics Kawhi and his inner circle have used over the years. All the dirty laundry is being aired out, and in this video, let's take a detailed look at the controversy surrounding Kawhi Leonard, and everything leading up to this unfathomable circumstance he found himself in.
I'm a fun guy, I just can't give you a whole spiel.
The 2019 offseason, Kawhi signs with the LA Clippers. So the 2019 playoffs saw the Toronto Raptors capture their first championship in franchise history, with Kawhi Leonard carrying them on his back. While there were hopes he could re-sign with Toronto and run it back, his decision was set in stone. He wanted to go to LA. I mean, on paper, it seems reasonable that an NBA player wants to return home, to be surrounded by family and friends. But was that the real reason Kawhi wanted to go to LA? What's been buried amongst the headlines, however, were articles like these. Reportedly, Kawhi's uncle, Dennis Robertson, was hard to deal with. Quote, according to sources, Leonard and his camp, namely Uncle Dennis, asked for a lot from the Raptors in that meeting. Things players don't generally ask for in standard contract negotiations. Their requests were unreasonable. Josh Lewenberg of TSN reported, the Raptors have reached out to the league multiple times this season when they felt the Clippers have crossed a line in their not-so-subtle pursuit of Leonard, I'm told. It wasn't just the Raptors, but the Lakers also chimed in. Bear in mind, they were Kawhi's original target. The Lakers felt their tactics were very bizarre and sketchy. Now, all of this was from 2019, but no one really cared because people believed Kawhi was leaving the Raptors regardless, so it didn't really matter how he felt. What this does tell you, however, is that maybe he did want to stay, initially, and by quote unreasonable requests, perhaps Kawhi and Uncle Dennis wanted compensation behind the scenes, yet the Raptors were not willing to do that, whereas the Clippers did. I mean, they have the richest owner in sports, who's willing to spend whatever he wants to get the best players. Maybe this is the reason why Kawhi ultimately chose the Clippers, cause he knew he'd get additional compensation outside of his contract. Now let's talk about Aspiration, the company that Ballmer allegedly used to funnel an additional $28 million to Kawhi to circumvent the NBA salary cap. What kind of company is it? Here's the timeline. They were founded in 2013 and basically describe themselves as a, quote, environmentally conscious digital bank, who sells carbon credits to large companies by planting trees. I mean, what? That already sounds kinda shady. By 2020, they received $250 million in funding. In 2021, Steve Ballmer committed $315 million of his own money to finance Aspiration. In 2022, they became a sponsor for his team and signed Kawhi to an exclusive $28 million endorsement deal. Now, some have suggested that this sponsor was a complete sham, and that Kawhi did not do anything to represent Aspiration, and it was purely a way for Ballmer, a huge investor of the company, to pay Kawhi under the table. In fact, Kawhi never even appeared in any Aspiration events or promotional material, while other players did. However, to play devil's advocate, the Clippers did start tweeting out stuff like this, using Kawhi's name along with Aspiration. So I'd imagine there was some sort of partnership where Aspiration could leverage Kawhi's name as a way to plant more trees? Yeah, I guess. Nonetheless, this was supposed to be a team sponsor. Aspiration sponsored the entire Clippers team, so why does it seem like only Kawhi got paid a ton of extra money on top of that?
That there was a secret $28 million deal that Kawhi Leonard signed, an endorsement deal. This is a deal that nobody knew about with a company called Aspiration. What I'm saying via 7 sources who used to work at Aspiration is that this is a deal that was brokered to explicitly circumvent the salary cap.
When Pablo Torre dropped this bombshell out of nowhere, most media outlets were hesitant to pick it up immediately. It took ESPN almost a whole day to report on it. And I'd guess it's because this type of news can seriously damage somebody's credibility if they were wrong. However, with more and more news outlets doing their due diligence, more stories are coming out, and all of the peculiar moments surrounding Kawhi have resurfaced. Anyway, Aspiration would only sponsor the team for 2 seasons, as they went bankrupt shortly after that. In January 2024, the US Department of Justice discovered they weren't planting as many trees as they claimed. A year after that, Aspiration filed for bankruptcy, as their co-founder Joe Sandberg was arrested for fraud. Yeah, it's not looking too good. Then 6 months after that, Pablo Torre released his own investigation into Aspiration and Kawhi Leonard, claiming that Ballmer paid Kawhi without requiring him to do any marketing or endorsement deals for Aspiration. Considering that previously, Kawhi's group attempted to ask for unreasonable compensation from the Raptors and Lakers all those years ago, it's logical to assume it had something to do with getting extra money outside of his contract. But it was only the Clippers who fulfilled his request. When they got accused by Pablo Torre, the response by the Clippers was basically exactly what you expect. They released a statement claiming negligence, and they had no idea Aspiration was a complete sham of a company with a criminal as a co-founder. Quote, "Neither the Clippers nor Steve Ballmer circumvented the salary cap. The notion that Steve invested in Aspiration in order to funnel money to Kawhi Leonard is absurd. Steve invested because Aspiration's co-founders presented themselves as committed to doing right by their customers while protecting the environment." Now, I did my own research, and apparently it wasn't just Microsoft who got bamboozled. Other large companies like Meta and Clarity AI, and even celebrities like Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert Downey Jr., and Drake, they all invested a huge sum of money into Aspiration. And their partnership with the Clippers was actually supposed to be a 23-year sponsorship deal worth over $300 million. Yet by the second year of that deal, they were already bankrupt. So for Ballmer to claim he had no idea Aspiration's money was going down the drain, that kinda does make sense. Especially since so many other rich people got tricked into investing just like he did. Nevertheless, a 23-year sponsorship is insane. It's quite easy to funnel a few million to Kawhi every year and get away with it, because the line between a team sponsor and a player sponsor, it's kinda blurred. What I mean by this is, when the NBA allowed teams to be sponsored by other companies, it created a very ambiguous situation. The official rule states NBA players are not to be directly paid by the team's official sponsors. Instead, they earn money from team sponsors through individual endorsement deals for products or services. Basically, with a rule as vague as this, not all players on the team are paid equally. Somebody like Kawhi Leonard is obviously gonna earn more from team sponsorships than, like Nicholas Batum. Even if the goal of Kawhi and Uncle Dennis was to get more money under the table, it's hard to prove it with concrete evidence. But do they need concrete evidence? Apparently not.
Unless there is a paper trail that the money that Steve Ballmer invested in this company went into Kawhi Leonard's pocket directly, I think it's going to be extremely difficult to do that. The Clippers are not dumb.
A new rule in the CBA claims that circumstantial evidence can be used if salary circumvention cannot be rationally explained. So the investigation just needs to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Kawhi was being paid irrationally. While his salary cap circumvention is the issue that people choose to focus on, this story has brought out all of the Clippers' wrongdoings in the last several years, starting when they first tried to recruit Leonard to their team in the first place. For example, back in October 2024, an ex-Clippers coach sued the Clippers for conspiring a multi-year tampering effort to get Kawhi to come there. He mentioned the team had a complete disregard for the anti-tampering law, and they were sending scouts, executives, high-ranking members of the Clippers brass to attend games in San Antonio and Toronto, presumably to talk to him and Uncle Dennis. Even Lawrence Frank, the Clippers' assistant coach at the time, was seen attending several games in Toronto when Kawhi played for the Raptors. Even if the investigation towards Aspiration doesn't lead to anything, there has to be consequences for this ludicrous level of tampering the Clippers have conducted. And all of that just to lose in the first round. This begs the question, what should the punishment be? Let me remind you of the Joe Smith situation. Back in 2000, the Minnesota Timberwolves were discovered to be involved in a scandal with Joe Smith. Basically, they had an under-the-table agreement to pay him a few small contracts first and then get his bird rights, which would then allow them to pay him a massive contract afterwards. They just had an agreement under the table, but he wasn't getting paid extra under the table, if you know what I mean. Yet this became such a massive controversy that the NBA realized it could potentially tarnish the image of their business. So they dropped a nuke on the Wolves. They lost 5 future first-round picks. They were eventually given back 2 of those picks, but still, the precedent has been set for this kind of violation. Back in the day, some even suggested this was too harsh, and David Stern just wanted to make an example of the Wolves to steer away other teams from trying to do the same thing. However, over the years, over the decades, with new things like team sponsorships and increased recruiting efforts, the tampering punishments have been quite lax. It's usually nothing more than a fine. If the investigation concludes that the Clippers did indeed commit a violation, or several violations, I'm not even sure they'll get hit that hard. At the very worst, they might lose a first-round pick. At the very least, they'll get fined, or something like that. These days, the punishments are typically not severe enough for the crime. Anyway, that's it for this video. I might make another to follow up on this story if more details come to light, but let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Do you believe the Clippers were up to something? Do you think they purposely circumvented the cap? Let me know your thoughts. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.